Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. Failure to clean up the Mount Nansen mine site west of Carmacks continues to violate First Nations rights. That is the accusation the Little Salmon Carmacks First Nation has lobbed at Mount Nansen Remediation Limited Partnership, the company behind the work. In a water use dispute, the First Nation calls the problem egregious. Julian Gignac has that story.
In an application filed with the Yukon Water Board, the First Nation argues contamination at the mine is increasing, and more than 20 years after it was declared abandoned. As well, it says that work to keep the site stable is actually making matters worse. The First Nation says Mount Nansen has always proven to be a key hub for traditional harvesting, but no more. Fearing contamination, citizens have to travel hours out just to find plants and animals that are still healthy. The First Nation calls this devastating, an affront to the First Nations modern treaty. As a result, it's calling on the Yukon Water Board to amend the water use license to ensure adequate monitoring and water use efforts. As well, the First Nation is after compensation, though at this time it remains unclear what the dollar amount would be. And finally, the First Nation is wanting a public hearing. Julian Gignac, CBC News, Whitehorse.
2 people from Pevernatuck, Nunavik have been missing on the land for almost 3 days, and search and rescue hasn't found any traces of them. 19-year-old Willie Onaluk Jr. and 22-year-old Viola Novalinga Jr. left Pevernatuck around 8 o'clock Sunday night. They were headed to Iqaluit. It's usually a 4 to 6 hour journey by snowmobile, but no one has seen or heard from them since. More than 20 people from both Pevernatuck and Iqaluit have been out on snowmobiles searching for them, and there's also a plane searching from the air.
We still have hope for the community knows about it. They have been praying for them.
Kalinga wants anyone with information about what might have happened to get in touch with Hunter Support in Pevernatuck. A new carbon tax exemption is in the pipeline for people in the NWT, but one MLA says the whole conversation around the tax is missing the point. Shauna Morgan says the message she hears from government leaders is that carbon pricing hurts people because there's no economically viable alternatives to fossil fuels in the territory. She says that's not true. Morgan asked the NWT Minister of Finance today to talk about the programs in place to help people shift away from fossil fuels. Here's that exchange.
In contrast to the perception that there are no alternatives in the Northwest Territories to heating oil or heating with fossil fuels, can you give us some highlights or insights on the steps the GNWT has already taken and is taking to help residents or businesses either use less heating fuel or switch to renewable alternatives for heating, including in public housing units?
There is quite a lot that could be potentially said here, and I certainly, while I don't want to speak for my colleague too much with respect to housing, I am able to happily say that there is already, as of this last year, the Housing Northwest Territories has its own energy strategy. There was also, of course, a variety of GHG grant programs administered by the GNWT. Arctic Energy Alliance has been a long-standing partner with the GNWT. Almost $3 million goes to them for a variety of programs that include rebate programs for folks to make changes in terms of what they're doing to support energy alternatives in their own lives. $12.9 million has gone through to Arctic Energy Alliance, and this is now where we are looking to the Low Carbon Economy Leadership Fund. That's a federal fund that we work with. That also then again is helping to support energy retrofits to examine people's energy uses. A significant amount of money also flowing to Housing NWT with respect to public housing. Our own capital asset retrofit program earmarks money to start to get our own buildings that the GNWT is responsible for off of more expensive forms of fuel. And again, Mr. Speaker, I know you're trying to keep us succinct here, but there's actually a tremendous amount that is happening. Again, the core funding to Arctic Energy Alliance, and also quite a lot of work now happening as well with electric vehicle rebates, the electric vehicle or electric bikes, which I think people laughed at when we first talked about about it here? Well, to my surprise, it's been overexpended, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot is happening in this space. A lot more can be happening in this space. And I do think that's the direction that the conversation around carbon needs to go, and carbon fuels is around what we're going to do to reduce our use and change our habits. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The NWT government abruptly announced yesterday that it's exempting home heating fuel from the carbon tax. It comes almost 4 months after the federal government announced a similar exemption for provinces under the federal carbon tax system. The NWT exemption will continue for 3 years. It starts on April 1st, but it will not apply to other heating fuels like propane. Public consultation on Landlords and Tenants Act is underway in the Yukon, a new act. Hearings took place in Whitehorse last night. The goal is to introduce a new version of the act next year. Virginie Anne has the details.
The government launched its review last fall with what it calls Solutions Lab. The process initially gathered feedback from tenants and landlords. The next step is public engagement, and that's where last night's meeting comes in. I spoke with several people who were there. They're not happy with the process so far. One person even described the evening as the worst public engagement they've ever seen. And they feel like there's an imbalance in the process and is too focused on landlords and how they can benefit from the new act. People also told me there was a lack of diversity on the panel that ran the session, and they want to see more data. As an example, here's one of the issues that was identified by the advisory group. They say landlords are leaving the market because they can't control rent and expenses are increasing. So they're proposing more flexibility in lease agreements. But the advisory group admits there's no data to back any of that. So there'll be more consultation throughout the territory this month, but people are already unhappy with the process and they're calling for more opportunities to have their say. Virginie Anne, CBC News, Whitehorse.
One Apex resident says more services are needed in her community. She says with limited transportation and nowhere to shop, people are going hungry. Apex is about 5 kilometers from downtown Iqaluit. It's home to more than 300 people, but there are no convenience stores, no recreation facilities, and there's no public transportation. Even the food bank is not accessible. Sarah Ann Samayok says it's a struggle living outside the city with no services.
They are in Iqaluit and nothing in Apex. I wrote that a lot of people struggle in Apex. Some have no rides, their kids go hungry, so I wrote the people of Apex need help.
Samayok says the city of Iqaluit needs to step up and do something about the situation. CBC reached out to the city, but so far we've not heard back. The Kivadluk AllWeather Road consultations wrapped up in Rankin Inlet last night. The planned project would connect Arviat, Baker Lake, Chesterfield Inlet, Rankin Inlet, and Whale Cove, making it easier to transport goods and people. Nunavut's Deputy Minister of Transportation says most people at the meetings were in support of the plan, but others had concerns.
Wildlife is one of them. We've had concerns about the cost of it and about the potential for accidents. And it's a big change for the region. It would be a huge change for the region, and with change always comes good and bad.
One person said a railroad would be better, while others pointed out that a road has been discussed since the 1980s. Fewer than 10 people attended the meeting in Rankin Inlet. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh vowed today to continue pressure for a national pharmacare plan, saying he wants concrete government action by March 1st. Pharmacare was among the New Democrats' conditions for supporting the Liberals in Parliament after the last election. Today's comments didn't explicitly threaten a no-confidence motion, but they prompted speculation.
We are very serious that pharmacare has to be delivered. We need to see legislation and some additional steps. And I made that very clear to the Prime Minister. I put him on notice that we expect that by March 1st. If not, there will be repercussions.
That from NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Now, we also heard from federal Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre today, who confirmed that he's opposed to allowing the use of puberty blockers on children. Poilievre was grilled about his views on gender-affirming medical treatments for youth after Alberta's premier announced plans to ban some of those treatments for children 15 and younger.
I think that we should protect children and their ability to make adult decisions when they're adults.
So you think only adults should make, you said yes? Just to be clear, you said yes, only adults should take puberty blockers?
I think we should protect children, let them make adult decisions when they become adults.
So you do support age restrictions? You are against puberty blockers for kids under the age of 18, is that
Yes.
Meanwhile, hundreds of Alberta students walked out of class today to protest the provincial government's proposed gender policies. The sweeping changes were announced by Alberta Premier Danielle Smith last week. As Travis McEwen reports, students are hoping the protests show support for fellow students and send a message to the Premier.
Just after 10 a.m., students at Strathcona Composite High School walked out of class. It's part of protests against the Alberta government's planned policies around transgender youth. Close to 70 high school students took part.
It's really easy in today's day and age to feel alone and to feel like no one really cares. So we're hoping to show that people do care still.
It's really important to me as a trans person myself to show up and support all the other people who maybe can't and try to just, I guess, be a voice for those who can't speak up or speak out.
South of the city in Leduc, a bit of a smaller turnout, but a cause close to the high school student who organized this rally.
Because my brother is trans and I wanted to show him that I care about him and I care about every single trans person in this province and everywhere, and I wanted to give a voice to the people who can't voice their concerns.
One of the larger turnouts in Edmonton featured a couple hundred students at Victoria School of the Arts. The policy they're opposing includes restrictions on youth changing their names or pronouns at school, and age restrictions for hormone therapy or gender-affirming surgery.
Since the province's gender policies were announced, we've heard a lot from politicians and parents, but for many of the students here, this is their chance to voice their opinion against those policies.
Limiting sexual education is horrendous. It leads to more people getting hurt. Lack of knowledge is like a major killer. If you don't have proper education, all you're doing is opening yourself up to harm.
The policy is really endangering children, I believe, and I think it's so important that we're doing this at school, which is where a lot of the policies are taking place.
I honestly don't know how much of a difference it'll make to Danielle Smith, but I do know that it will make a difference to the people out there who are scared and who are worried right now.
As for Premier Danielle Smith, she defended the proposed policies during a trip to Ottawa this week, saying she spoke to transgender people who expressed concerns of children transitioning at a young age. The policies are expected to be addressed in the legislature in the fall. Travis McEwen, CBC News, Edmonton.
A team of explorers are in Yellowknife this week, preparing for an ambitious journey. You might remember the Transglobal Car Expedition. It made headlines 2 years ago for violating Canadian airspace rules after landing in Yellowknife and sinking a truck in Nunavut. Now they're back and claiming that they will be the first to travel around the world with wheeled vehicles. The CBC's Leanie Lambrink has more.
The Transglobal Car Expedition is using 12 vehicles to travel around the world. 3 Ford Super Duties, modified to have 6 44-inch tires each, will take them part of the way, from Yellowknife to Cambridge Bay.
And from Cambridge Bay, we're using amphibious vehicles that we've already staged up there last year. So over the places where the ice is moving, where we stand to have open water, we're using the amphibious vehicles that actually float.
The route goes from Cambridge Bay to Resolute, then to the North Pole. From there, they'll go down through Greenland, Europe, Africa, Antarctica, the South Pole, before heading back up through South and Central America to the USA, where they started in January. It's expected to take 17 months.
But we've been pushed back because of the warm weather for sure. The challenge is that we have to get off the south tip of Greenland before it gets too warm. And so we're really kind of in that race against time.
The expedition has faced setbacks before. During a pre-expedition trip in Canada's north 2 years ago, one of their trucks went through the ice. It was a huge logistical undertaking to get it back out.
What we learned is the ice can change really fast. And we also learned that the relationships with the Indigenous communities here are so crucially important. When we first got here 2 years ago, we didn't even really know who to talk to.
Comrie Picard says they've spent time working on those relationships. They're bringing a man from Cambridge Bay along for part of the journey. Brandon Langan has worked with the crew before. He was actually in the truck when it broke through the ice. He says he'll have a few roles during the trip to Resolute Bay.
The biggest one is like a bear monitor, being able to help avoid certain areas as well, and just helping them navigate through some of the ice. And they're already like experts at that, but they just want a little local knowledge to help out with that. We've been here for thousands of years, and there's just certain pieces of advice here and there that could help them.
A professor of Arctic tourism is skeptical of the trip's purpose.
My initial thought is simply why, right? Like, I don't inherently see a value in it, right? Like, I know on their website, it's like, 0 successful expeditions have done this in the past. And I'm like, well, perhaps that's for a reason, right?
Mayor says tourism like this can bring short-term benefits to Arctic communities, short-term employment, money spent on groceries, gas. But he says the expedition could do more. Investing in scholarships or sponsorships would help the communities even after the trip is over. As for why they're embarking on it, the Transglobal Car Expedition says few people have been to both the North and South Poles. They want to be the first to do so by earth and sea alone in a single journey. Lainey Lambrink, CBC News, Yellowknife.
It's the dead of winter, and wildfires are still smoldering and burning in the NWT and northern Alberta. The snow and cold hasn't put them out. Many in northern Alberta are burning in forests near high level. The team at Alberta Wildfire took media crews to Fox Lake to see the situation firsthand. That community is about 800 kilometers north of Edmonton and 200 kilometers south of the NWT border. The CBC's Trevor Wilson was on that trip. He has more on what firefighters are up against.
We are currently sitting with 57 wildfires burning in the province. We've had 12 new wildfires since the start of 2024. We had over 60 wildfires that were carryover wildfires from the 2023 season, which is incredibly high compared to what we typically see. Our 5-year average is around 6, so we're sitting at about 10 times as many as we usually see.
We definitely in the past have done wildfire operations in the winter, but not to this scale. We have about 16 carryover fires from the 2023 season in our area alone. Due to the fact that this area is adjacent to the community, it's really important for us to take care of this area. By exposing the heat in the ground, we're lessening the hazards to the community. We're always working to monitor fires in the winter and take a look at them. We had ground crews come scout the area and map out where these hotspots were, and then we make a plan to work on the ones that we find are the biggest hazard. The crews use hand tools to expose the earth and dig up that heat. They've also been accompanied by equipment and water trucks, and this is all in an effort to lessen the impacts to the community. We are in drought-like conditions here still. We ended the fire season last year in drought-like conditions, and we are expecting similar weather conditions come the spring. So a lot of this work is in an effort and preparation for the 2024 season, again, to really lessen the impacts towards communities, adjacent communities.
This is the CFPC's largest detachment, home to elite units, federal and municipal scope. Congratulations on making the cut.
Have you spoken with your father?
We're coming for you and everyone like you.
I would rather be broke than blue.
Lots of reasons to not be a cop.
And a Surrey girl should know all of them.
Maybe you should reconsider the uniform and everything that it represents.
I'd rather fight from inside it to make a change.
Why, hello. It's me, Seth Rogen. 10 potters will be facing off in the most extraordinary ceramics competition show that this country has ever seen.
I'm Jen Robertson, and I'll be your host.
So are these potters ready?
This exploded.
To test their skills at the wheel and push themselves every week?
Oh, no.
So the ones that do stand out, they really do stand out.
And who will be named champion?
I'm excited to see it. Oh, wow!
Of the Great Canadian Pottery Throwdown.
can any of this be fair?
Now you might think, hey, we just need more doctors, but that's not really it.
A Russian scheme here
shows you where it starts, where it ends.
Were you really willing to risk that job?
Yes.
At Thunder Bay's favorite festival, Wake the Giant.
Ta-da! There it is.
It appears we have a mystery to solve.
You will be next.
He's dead.
A murderer was murdered.
Toronto Constabulary, stop!
Here we go.
Make it mini!
I'm gonna push it. Let's go.
My hands are shaking.
This is all very overwhelming. Don't expect anything normal.
I can't believe it. I'm here.
A pod of orcas trapped in sea ice for the past 2 days is reported to have freed itself. More than a dozen orcas were discovered stuck in pack ice off northern Japan on Tuesday. They were crowded together, sharing one opening in the ice about 1 kilometer from shore. The orcas were spotted by fishermen and reported to local officials who checked on the pod. When the officials returned this morning, the orcas were gone. It's believed they were able to escape as more openings in the ice developed. Some Yellowknifers got a rare chance to grab an Airtight stove this week after a local school sold some of its old supply. The iconic stove has been discontinued since the pandemic. Robert Holden tells us what makes these stoves so special.
William McDonald's school is selling some old outdoor gear this week. A pile of Airtight stoves, also known as hippie killers, sit in a dark storage unit. They're old, rusted, and they're flying like hotcakes. And look who we found snatching one up.
Shout out to my employer, CBC. But no, I saw it on Facebook today. I needed a wall tent stove, and it was a good deal. So swung by, picked it up, and hopefully I'll be staying cozy this next winter.
The stove has been historically popular in the NWT due to its lightweight, compact size and warmth. Former prospector Walt Humphreys remembers them fondly.
I love my Airtights. What the Airtight was good is I could go camp in a place for a week, pack up and move to another place with my Airtight, and it wasn't a big heavy thing to move around.
The stove's nickname, Hippie Killer, comes from its incredibly hot temperature, which has been known to burn down tents. Ken Weaver co-owns Yellowknife's Weaver and DeVore, which sold many of them through the years. He says the Winnipeg-based supplier, Great West Metals, is facing financial difficulties.
They weren't able to get materials to build the stoves. Everybody just knows they're not available, and they've given up. They're not calling anymore.
Weaver says alternative versions of the stoves can still be sourced online, but without a supplier, there's no plan for their return. Northerners might have to wait for another rummage sale to own a piece of history. Robert Holden, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Some unique children's books are popping up in schools across the Beaufort Delta. They're all original and written in the Indigenous languages of the region. 3 are in classrooms right now, and as the CBC's Des Loreen reports, more are on the way.
You can tell me something from this picture. Vela, can you tell me something from this picture?
It looks like they're in fall.
Local animals in local languages and translated by local elders. These books are only the beginning.
Yeah, we're trying to create more local Indigenous resources, so we've been partnering with local translators and Inhabit Media to create more children's books celebrating the Indigenous languages.
The books are printed in Inuvialuktun and Gwich'in. They feature stories about the Mackenzie River. One is about the life cycle of a caribou, and an interactive activity book is also on the shelves.
Like the flowers are like hearts.
They do kind of look like hearts. Look really closely, guys. Do you guys see the heart shapes that Vela's talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Students have been enjoying seeing their culture in school.
They get really excited to see local content. Sometimes they know the translators personally, right? It might be their relatives, so they always think that's really cool. And we're trying to do more to celebrate the Indigenous languages. So we're hoping to get more and more resources out, and it's Indigenous Language Month, so we thought this would be a good month to promote the resources more.
These books aren't only in schools. Copies can be picked up for free at the Education Council office in Inuvik. And for the excited little readers, a new book about surviving in the wilderness will be made in Gwich'in that'll be released very soon. Des Loreen, CBC News, Inuvik.
And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. We leave you with a look at the weather. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
Saul, toast is burning.
Toast is not.
Every time she has a seizure, she smells something burning. Now, if we can provoke that smell by probing the surface of the brain, we'll find the source of the seizures. Mrs. Gold, do you feel anything?
I can see the most wonderful lights.
And now what do you feel?
Did you pour cold water on my hand, Dr. Penfield?
Now what? What is it, Mrs. Gold?
Burnt toast. Dr. Penfield, I can smell burnt toast. Dr. Wilder Penfield. He cured my seizures and hundreds more. They say he drew the roadmap of the human brain. We just called him the greatest Canadian alive.
Closing this case gets you one step closer to you getting back on the squad and keeping you out of prison.
You're not a detective. You're a con artist. You have a driver's license, right?
Of course, I have 9. If you couldn't be a cop, what would you be?
Nothing. My dad raised me to be a cop. That's who I am. Stay here.
You're adorable.
You guys are making this entire station look like a circus.
He's busy trying to solve a murder. What are you doing?
Thanks for having my back.
Look at you.
Is this your girlfriend? This is not my girlfriend. She's way too cool to be your girlfriend. She's not way too cool to be my girlfriend.
Knock, knock!
Who's that?
He's fired!
I'm starting to think you don't know what a joke is.
You're gonna eat nothing but raw spleen.
Getting into peak physical shape is 50% training, 50% diet.
Never occurred to me to bring lawn chairs out here. Never occurred to the Egyptians to build the pyramids until it did.
Oh! Simpler times.
Let's set you up with a lunch date. You're deaf? I don't know sign.
This feels a little wrong.
If accessibility is wrong, we don't want to be right.
Spicy. Oh, do tell.
Breaking news. The critics are talking. Oh, this is it. Imagine the Wonder Years if it were written by Gene Shepard. They twisted it all up.
Well, you can't trust a newsman.
Highly recommended.
Onwards.
Onwards.
Heartwarming.
This doesn't mean I'm better than anyone here tonight. It just says it.
100% fresh.
Well, I suppose we don't need to get rid of the cable right this second.
Son of a Critch.
You look like a cod gasping for air.
Name something you see people do on TV that you secretly could do better. Host. I knew that was hard.
Family Feud Canada. Watch free on CBC Gem.
We want you to know that you can ask us anything. Need help with your Riz?
You just made Riz uncool. There is something that's been bothering me. Are mutual funds or ETFs better for my long-term goals?
Load weapon!
Welcome to the show!
Fire! Big, 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 big!
It's
I'm from the Liberal Party, and I...
What do we know
About that with Andrew Chang.
I think we can explain.
Watch free on CBC Gem.